Welcome, everyone, and very glad that you could join us today. My name is Paula Newcomb, and I'm the Northeast Regional Coordinator of the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I will be the host and the question moderator for today's webinar, Moving Beyond Avoidance, Conflict Resolution for Beginners. If you have questions during the webinar, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will get to them at the end of the webinar. Today's presenter is Beka Lemons. She's the director of the Huntington City Township Public Library here in Indiana. After this webinar has been transcribed, it will be available on the Indiana State Library's archive webinars page. If you are watching an archived recording of this presentation, information on how to obtain your LEU is in the video's description in YouTube. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to the Indiana State Library's e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word, and also check our continuing education website for other professional development opportunities. So let's get started. And also as a reminder in the chat, if you have hosts and panelists down there, make sure it's switched to everyone so you can put your comments to everyone. All right, and now I will hand the presentation over to Beka.
Okay, thank you, Paula. I'm glad to be here talking to everybody today. We have people from all over the country today, so I'm really excited that we've got a good group of folks. We're going to go through some conflict resolution things, and hopefully at the end we will have some time to possibly go through some scenarios. We'll see how it plays out. I've got a lot of information, so we'll go from there. If you want to put anything in the chat, like Paula said, just put it in the chat and we'll go from there. I'm probably not going to be paying too much attention to it, so might not get my attention, but we'll go from there. Okay, so conflict resolution, what are we doing? We're moving beyond avoidance, okay? We'll find out what avoidance is in a little bit when we get through this here, okay? So the first thing I want to do is kind of define for you guys what conflict is, all right? So conflict is any interaction between people in which people do not agree or are working towards different objectives, okay? This is a reminder that conflict doesn't have to be a big blow up screaming match. Conflict can be literally anything. I don't like where you put the coffee pot, or, I don't like this chair that I'm sitting in, things like that, where people are just, there's something where we have a stress about something and it's going to cause some conflict because we're working for different odds. Okay. So just think about that. Some of the things that cause conflict that we maybe don't think about, there's all kinds of different things, right? Some of them are obvious, right? Maybe we're overworked. Maybe we're burned out. Maybe the communication's bad. Maybe we just have different values. Maybe we're super stressed out. We've got terrible patrons, but maybe we're bored, maybe we just have personal issues at home. Maybe we have unrealistic expectations about our job. So there's different kinds of things that can cause conflict. So just be aware of that and remember that literally conflict can happen at any time for any reason. And yes, it's going to surprise you. So just think about the fact that, we have to be prepared for those things. All right. So there is a little hope in this. Okay. Conflict is inevitable. No matter what you do, it's part of life. Okay. As I was saying earlier, when we just got logged on, conflict is like change. It's always going to happen whether we hate it or not. So let's learn to not hate it. Let's figure out how we can make conflict productive and make it be a part of our lives that is not something that stresses us out to the max, okay? Obviously, there's always going to be stress, but we're trying to figure out how we can reduce that, right? So hopefully I'll give you some strategies to be able to do that today. Okay, so first things first, we're going to talk about conflict management styles, or how we deal with the things that trouble us, right? First things first, here's what we talked about. So avoiding is what we all think about when we think about conflict, right? Everybody that I talk to, how do you deal with conflict? Oh, I avoid it like the plague, right? I hate it. I don't like it. I avoid it. I try not to get into it. I try not to deal with it. Avoidance of conflict is deliberate inaction in the face of conflict, okay? And I want you guys to think about avoidance that way, right? Avoidance is not a passive thing. It's not just saying, oh, I'm just going to, whatever, I'm just going to avoid this. It is deliberate inaction. You are making a choice to not deal with that thing, and that has consequences, okay? Avoidance is like the most common response to conflict. Why? because people just, it's hard. It's uncomfortable. It's emotional. It's unpleasant, but it doesn't have to be. Okay. We need to teach ourselves ways to make it pleasant as much as possible. All right. Avoidance is not a healthy response for anybody. Okay. Problems never get solved. And when problems never get solved, everybody's mad all the time. We don't want that. That just makes it worse. And then when it blows up, it's that much harder to deal with. So we want to make sure we're dealing with things in the moment when we can. Okay. If we avoid things, stress just continues to build and build and build. We get burned out. People quit, right? We quit because we can't handle it. And so we want to make sure that we're not building that up to the point of really just causing a huge problem. The other problem with avoiding things is people lose trust, right? Even if you're not a manager, if you're a regular employee and you're dealing with other people, or even if you're dealing with patrons, right? If you continue to avoid conflict with your patrons, they're not going to trust you. If you don't deal with problem patrons, nobody else in the building that is going to trust you, right? Other patrons might not feel safe and they say, oh, so-and-so gets away with whatever. I don't trust that I'm safe if I go in there, right? So we need to make sure that we're not avoiding those things. Okay. So what else can we do? What are some other conflict management kind of strategies? The next step from avoiding, right? If we, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of myself. I dealt with that conflict. Would be accommodating. Okay, that's the logical next step, in which we just say, okay, whatever you want, you can have it. I don't want to have conflict with you. Accommodating is almost as bad, if not worse, than avoidance. All right. So essentially what we're saying is you can do whatever you want. You can walk all over me. You can have your way. I don't care. You know, whatever. I just want this to be over. I want to walk away and I don't want to think about it again. Now, sometimes accommodation can be really useful. Okay. If the demand is reasonable, somebody comes to me and says, you know, my chair is broken and I really want a new one. And they've been mad for a week because their chair is broken. And they come to me and say, I really need a new chair. I'm going to look at them and go, okay, I'm going to get you a new chair, right? That's accommodating because I'm doing what they want, but it's a reasonable request and it's good for them. It's good for me. Everybody's happy. But we don't want to give in to unreasonable demands, right? That's bad for everybody. Somebody comes to me and says, I'm never going to work on Saturday and you can't make me. If I accommodate that, everybody else is going to be mad at me and it screws up the whole schedule and everything's just not working now. So when we're accommodating, we just want to be super careful about what we're actually giving to people, okay? The next option is competing. And this is a really terrible option too. I'm giving you all the terrible options first. Competing is essentially an argument and a lack of willingness to come to agreement. This is a me versus you, headbutt, win-lose situation, okay? In this kind of conflict, everybody assumes they're right and nobody's willing to change positions, all right? When competition happens, when we go through this kind of conflict management, somebody's always dissatisfied. In a competition kind of environment, nobody ever walks away with everybody feeling like they got what they wanted. And that's going to create more conflict down the road. Okay. Usually in these situations, the person who's in power is going to be the one that wins. So a supervisor, administrator, things like that are 99% of the time the one that's going to win. If it's not the person in power that wins in a competing situation, then you have the inmates running the asylum essentially, and staff are going to try to get kind of whatever they want. And even if you're not a manager, right, like you don't want to kind of be fighting because it doesn't create a good environment. Okay. It's hard to solve problems that way. There's sometimes when you may need to do this. Okay. If you are a manager or if you're enforcing a policy, something like that, you may have to say, I am right on this and you are wrong. Because this is what the policy says and we have to do it this way and there's no other option. Okay. And that's okay. But we'll talk about how we handle that and how we talk to people about that in a positive way. All right. Okay. So a good option for conflict management, good option number one is compromise, right? I think we all feel like we know what compromise is, right? One party is giving some concession to someone else's demands, right? What compromising does in conflict management is it creates trust. Okay. People are trusting that you're going to listen to them, you're going to care about what they have to say, and you are going to be empathetic with them. You're going to give them what they need, right? You're going to look at them as a person and say, yep, I understand that you also have needs that need to be met, okay? The thing that we need to be really careful about when we're compromising is that we don't compromise too much, okay? Because when we compromise too much, we end up in an accommodating situation, right? Where we're just giving in, we're giving up our own stuff, and then we're going to be unhappy because we gave too much, right? We didn't get what we also needed out of that situation. Okay. I'm gonna give you a little bit of an example. This is kind of an oddball example, but it works for this one and the next one, so you can see the difference. So one thing to think about compromise, here's the example I came up with. Say you've got a bunch of people with, workstations in an open office, right? And somebody comes to you and says, man, would you switch workstations with me? Because mine is right next to the door and people coming in and out. It just bothers the heck out of me. I'm so distracted all the time. I can't get my work done. Okay. Totally reasonable complaint. We understand that. We know that you can get distracted and get bothered by people and whatever. Now, if it's no skin off of my back and I don't mind sitting next to the door, I can say, yeah, sure, I'll change workstations with you, no problem. Okay. But I need to be careful that I'm not putting myself in a bad situation where now I'm going to be distracted by the door. Okay. So just think about what you're willing to give and what you're not. Okay. So the next step from that then is collaborating. All right. When we collaborate, we work together to find a solution to something. All right. This is really hard, but it's the most effective conflict resolution strategy, bar none. Okay. In this, both people are going to work together. We're going to find a solution that works for everybody, and everybody's going to compromise a little bit. Okay. Collaboration, I can say the same thing for competition, right? When I say nobody's ever happy in competition, we can also say in collaboration, nobody's going to get 100% of what they want, right? But both people are going to get most of what they want. We're all going to get what we're comfortable with, okay? So in the previous example I gave you, okay, maybe you're not comfortable sitting by the door because you know you're going to get distracted too. So maybe we say something like, hey, I really can't do that. I can't sit next to the door either. So can I help you turn your desk around so your back is to the door so you don't see people coming in? Or can we keep the door shut? Or can we, leave a note that says, don't talk to us when you come in? Like, what other things can we work on to help you not be in that conflict situation that you have, but we're going to work, we're going to move on from it. Okay. We don't want to just say, I don't care. Like you deal with you. It's not my problem. Right. Cause that's not really what's going to help people. But how can we work together, figure out where we're at, what we can do? Okay. Have that conversation. We'll talk about what that conversation looks like to find those solutions in a little bit. Okay, so those are the conflict management styles. We're going to talk about some strategies here in a second. So just remember, okay, avoidance may feel good for you in the moment. All right, it may be the thing that doesn't stress you out. It may be the thing that's easy, but in the long term, it is not going to get you where you need to go. Okay, so you need to come to terms with being comfortable with finding some of these solutions. Okay. Now the biggest thing you're going to notice about all of these is in none of these cases did I say we're going to have a conversation where we dictate to people or we yell at them or we have screaming matches. Okay. I'm going to tell you how to avoid those things. All right. Because that's never going to be a good answer. All right. Okay. So conflict resolution strategies, what do we do when things go bad? Okay. How do we have these conversations? What do they look like? First one, number one thing in any conflict, you define that problem and you figure out what its actual source is. Okay. Find out what's really going on. The surface thing that you see is rarely the actual reason for that conflict. Okay. Conflict happens most often, like it comes to light when people are just fed up. They're done. They've probably been having conflict for weeks, but now you're seeing it because they're just done with it. Okay. So figure out what that actually is. If somebody is, oh my gosh, they're showing up for work 20 minutes late every single day. And you're like, man, like I'm having a conflict with you right now because you are not showing up for work on time. What's the reason for that? go to them and say, hey, why are you showing up late all of a sudden? You were always on time before, and figure out what is the actual reason for that. Maybe their car broke down and they have to ride their bike now. Maybe the person that was giving them a ride, their schedule changed. Figure out what's going on so we can solve that problem from there. Okay. We will talk again. We will have those conversations. I'll talk to you about that. Okay. Again, ask why it's happening until you find the real problem. Just keep asking why. That's my favorite thing. Ask why until there's no more whys. All right. Because if you just deal with if I just say you have to show up for work on time and I don't dig into that, it's probably not going to solve that actual problem because I haven't helped them figure out how to solve the thing that's making them late. Right. So I've just dictated you need to be on time. Well, that's not solving that conflict. That's just me telling you what to do. Okay. So think about that as we go through some of this stuff. And again, not just reacting to that immediate situation, but really figuring out how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? And how do we make sure this works out well for everybody? All right. Next thing, this is the hardest one, I think, but it's the most important. And I have some golden rules for you. We'll get to that in a second. But you have to be able to commit to open and honest communication. Okay. This is very hard for people because we have been taught to not say things. It's the whole, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all kind of scenario, right? But we need to get over that. Okay. We need to figure out how to say the things that need to be said, but in a kind way. Okay. In a productive way. I'm going to teach you how to do that. Hopefully I'm going to give you some hints how to do that. All right. One of my colleagues once said to me, we were having a conversation about this, and she said one of the things that kind of really sticks to me, she said, honesty is kind. Okay. And being honest with people when bad things are happening is the kindest thing to do because you have to deal with that stuff. If you don't deal with it, you are not being kind to anybody because you're creating more stress and you're letting that problem go and you're creating stress for the whole organization. Okay. So you're not acting in a kind way. All right. So be thoughtful about that. Couple of things thinking about communication. Don't sugarcoat or downplay a problem. All right. Don't say, well, I know this is really okay, but you got to just make sure that you do this thing the way that we want you to do because it's really important. No, be honest with people, be open. Okay. I don't know how many of you have heard management strategies, but there's this management strategy that was a thing that I absolutely hate, which is essentially the cookie sandwich, right? Like every criticism you give, you're supposed to put it in between two compliments, right? Like, well, I really like the way you talk to people, but I really need you to make sure that you do this. But you're really awesome, at something else. That's crap because you lose what's in between, right? Nobody pays attention to that. And again, we're just looking for excuses to not hurt somebody's feelings. Sometimes feelings are going to get hurt and that's inevitable, but we can do it in a nice way. Okay. So don't try to sugarcoat things. Don't try to make excuses or do anything like that. Okay. Make sure you're coaching on the behavior that you expect. All right. Don't yell at somebody for something they're not doing, but then not tell them what they're supposed to do. All right. I have a rule. I tell all of my new staff the first day they get here, I will never ever yell at you the first time you make a mistake. All right. I will always tell you what you need to do. Now, the second, third, fourth time, if you're not listening to me, that's going to be a problem. But I will never yell at you the first time. Don't be afraid to make mistakes because I'm going to coach you. Okay. So make sure we're telling people what we expect from them. All right. And then make sure we're working from a positive perspective. Okay. Positivity is all in your head. When we get to some of our conversation statements, we will see what that looks like in a conversation way. All right. So these next few things here are my golden rules. Okay. I made them in bold and highlight. These are my golden rules of open and honest communication. All right. Number one, don't hold things in. Okay. Don't avoid your own conflicts, your own feelings, your own things that you need. All right. So don't hold on to stuff. If something's bothering you, do something about it. Okay. Number two, this one's important. Think before you speak. Right. In a conflict situation, almost the worst thing that you can do is to just jump into it. All right. Think about what you're going to say. Write stuff down. Think about, okay, I have to have this conversation with this person. Write down what you think you need to say so you remember. Okay. Don't read it off the paper when you have that conversation with them, because that's just weird. But think about stuff before you speak. Okay. Next one, talk to someone that can do something about your problem. Okay. Gossiping and griping with your coworkers is not conflict management, right? You're just, again, creating more stress. All right. So if you have some conflict, make sure you're talking to the person that can actually deal with it, or the person who needs to be talked to about it, and that you're not kind of just running around, kind of griping about your problems, because that's not going to solve anything. Okay. That just makes more issues. Next one, because not only do we have to, be the giver of conflict conversations, sometimes we are the receiver of conflict conversations, right? Sometimes somebody has a conflict with us and comes to say, hey, I'm not happy about this thing that you did. When that happens, we have to commit to responding to that communication positively, and don't assume the worst when somebody corrects us or talks to us about something. Okay. Never say, oh my God, I thought you were going to fire me. I get that all the time. Oh my God, you called me in here. I thought you were going to fire me. I'm not going to fire you. Okay. I'm not going to report you to the higher ups. I'm not going to, whatever. I just need to have this conversation with you. So make sure that you're not the one that is kind of assuming the worst every time there's a conflict. All right. Assume that you can handle this in a positive way. And then the very last thing, take responsibility for your part in the conflict, if there is one. All right. If you made a mistake that created conflict with somebody, the best thing that you can say is, I'm sorry, that was my fault. Yep, I understand that I did this wrong. I understand that I wasn't communicating with you appropriately. Here's what we're going to do about it to move forward. Okay. Taking responsibility is the best way to create trust and create this open and honest communication, so that everybody else that you work with can also say, okay, I saw this person take responsibility. I can also do that without fear of being put down. Okay. So sometimes you have to be the one that steps up and says, yep, I apologize for that. I messed up. I do this all the time. If I forget something or something like that, I say the wrong thing, I don't remember to, file something or whatever, I'm really sorry. I did not mean to do that to you. Here's what we're going to do to make sure that doesn't happen again. Okay. So those are your keys to open and honest communication. There's plenty more, but that's what I've got. All right. So how do we then kind of recognize and manage these stressful reactions? All right. When we have a conversation with somebody, they're going to have a reaction to that. A lot of times it's going to be negative. Okay. Because they haven't heard me talking about it and they don't know how to react to it in a positive way. All right. So how do we manage that? Okay. When people come at us and they're mad, they're hostile about it, they're like, oh, you're full of it and you can't talk to me that way and rah, 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 rah. Number one thing, focus on the problem, not the person. Okay. Just say, look, I'm not mad at you. I just want to make sure that we're doing this thing the correct way. Right. I'm not yelling at you about this. I just want to make sure that we're not, having the same problem over and over again. Okay. Sometimes you need to take a break from a conversation. Sometimes it's okay to say, look, I understand that you're really not happy about this right now. I still want to talk about it. So maybe we can come back tomorrow. We can both think about what we need to talk about, and let's come back to it tomorrow when we can, both talk about it in a more positive way. Okay. Sometimes that's the best thing. Don't sit there and fight. Don't sit there and yell and fight and, back and forth and back and forth. Okay. And then lastly, get help if you need it, right? If you're not a supervisor, get help from a supervisor if you need it. But I would kind of give this with a little grain of salt that don't overwhelm somebody. Like, don't call in the supervisor like before you've had a chance, because what happens is if you go to somebody with a supervisor, oh my God, they go into panic mode and it's defense, from the get-go, and you're not going to have a good conversation. So if it's something you can try to deal with, try to do that. If it doesn't work out, if they don't respond, or it's something that's beyond you, get some help, okay? But try not to overwhelm somebody by just, going above their heads right away. Next thing we often see from people is people don't take responsibility, or they deny that anything happened. This happens all the time. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm never late. Yeah, you are. I watched you. So focus on the facts, right? Like, okay, here's exactly what happened, and I've got this, okay? And so this is where that thinking before you speak comes into action, okay? Make sure you have some examples, some documentation of things that you're talking about. If you have a conflict with someone, make sure you've written down, okay, these are the particular instances that I need to talk to you about. Going to somebody and saying, man, you're really rude to patrons is not helpful. But saying to somebody, I noticed when you talked to this patron that you were focusing on your computer screen and you weren't actually looking at them the entire time that they were standing in front of you. Because that's something somebody can do something about, right? They can fix that. They can't fix oh, you're rude to patrons without you telling them what that means, what that looks like, okay? So there's all of that stuff comes together. Now, if they say, I don't know what you're talking about, I'm always nice to patrons, again, you have that in front of you. Well, here's what I saw. So tell me what else that means. If it's not rude, tell me what else that was. And so you can go that way with it, okay? Another thing, oh my gosh, sometimes people are, can have self-pity. They can be genuinely upset at themselves. I think, honestly, one of the biggest reasons people avoid conflict is because they don't want to see somebody else cry, right? They don't want to make anybody cry, and it happens, right? So what happens when somebody sits in front of you and cries because they're like, oh my God, I screwed up and I'm so terrible and nobody likes me? What do you do? How do you respond to that? Number one, let people know that you're there to help them, right? Say, you know what? I understand that you're really upset about this. Please know that I am not upset at you. I just want to fix this issue and I'm going to help you through it. Okay. That's going to go a long way to helping people out. All right. Again, focus on the issue, not the person. This isn't your fault. We just need to fix this thing. Okay. Provide some examples of things that they can do to improve, because again, when you give people that agency to, be able to take care of things, that helps so much. All right. Be encouraging, hey, we got this. We can do this. I'm going to help you out. We're going to get through this together. We're going to make this work. All right. And that's all about the positivity, right? We could come at that negatively and be like, you know what, you're terrible. Shut up. But we don't want to do that. We want to be nice to people. At least I want to be nice to people. I don't know about the rest of you. Okay. The last thing here, some people might just be indifferent to what you're saying. They might just look at you and go, I don't care. So focus on the facts of the situation. Again, don't give up. Try not to give up. Tell them how their behavior is affecting you or affecting other people. Hey, when you're late by 5 minutes, I have to now go open that public desk, which means that I can't get my work done that I need to get done, which means that things are behind. And so then, we're all in this loop. So I really need to make sure that you're here on time when you're supposed to be here. Okay. And if somebody really is indifferent, they don't respond to you, whatever. If you are a manager, then your option is you need to start writing people up, right? If you're not a manager, then you go find one and say, hey, I've had this conversation with this person. They're not responding to me. I would really like if you could help me out to, help them understand what I'm talking about. Okay. All right. And then just lastly, remember, you're not always alone in this stuff. Reach out to your coworkers, your supervisors, administrators, anybody else to help you through those conflict situations when you need them. Okay. You have colleagues that that are probably in similar positions to you. Call them and say, hey, what do we do about this? Let's have a conversation. Can you help me work through this? Help me talk through it so I know how to talk to people. Now, this is not go gripe at your coworkers. This is saying, hey, what can I do here? Can you help me work through some situations? Help me workshop some comments that I can talk to these people. Okay. All right. So the next thing, we're going to talk about the actual conversation. So how do we manage those hard conversations in a positive way? All right. This is my tried and true checklist. Okay. Number one, be clear about the reason you're having that conversation. Why am I even talking to you today? That should be the number one thing that comes out of your mouth. Hey, I called you into the office today, or hey, I need to talk to you about because whatever thing. Okay. Again, focus on the problem, not the person. So here's like, when you're talking about, I like to use the example of people being late because it's something we encounter often, right? So instead of saying, I need to talk to you about being late all the time, you can say something like, we need to talk about, our expectations about being on time and how we can meet those expectations, right? Because I'm not saying you're a horrible person for showing up late. I'm saying we need to make sure that we're showing up on time, right? And I'm taking the pressure off of accusing that person of doing something bad. Now, we may want to do that, but that's not helpful in the conversation, okay? Sometimes we have to bite our tongue a little bit. Sometimes we have to put that aside and say, I need to have a productive conversation. And so I'm going to progress from that standpoint, okay? Next thing, use your I statements, be specific about things. I tell people all the time, you can use these at home too, because, this is something that like marriage therapists will tell you. Use those I statements, right? Like I feel, very frustrated when you aren't here on time because it puts me behind on my work. Okay. I just put that on me, right? This problem is about me and figuring out how we can get to the same point, right? I noticed that, you're having trouble getting your work done. Is there something I can do to help you? So try to be, try to put that on a little bit so that they understand there's two people in this conversation, right? Describe what you know about the situation, be clear about it again, that think before you speak kind of thing, and have some documentation. Talk about the impact of their behavior. Talked about that a little bit already. Make sure they understand, right? When you are rude to patrons, they're not going to come back. And if patrons don't come back, then we're going to have to close the doors, right? So, sometimes that's a little bit of hyperbole, but it's not untrue, right? So just make sure you're talking about that kind of thing. This is a very important part of the conversation. Ask for and listen to their response. Okay. Again, this is not a competition. This is, what are we asking for, and are we listening to that response, or are we just assuming that we already know what that response is going to be? Okay. Maybe we ask for it, but we don't really listen to it. That's not going to help us get to a good solution. Okay. So you have to ask and listen. Repeat what they're saying to you to verify that you understand it. That's always a good, parroting things back is a great way to communicate. Make sure you understand what you're doing. And then very last thing, make sure you're collaborating to find a solution on that. Okay. Even if it is, you are a manager and someone has done something that is against policy. Okay. Trying to think of a good example. Maybe you had a circulation clerk who, forgave $20 worth of fines. Policy is you can't do it if it's over $1. And you go to them and you say, hey, I just want to talk to you about the policy that, our fine waiving, threshold is $1. So what happened that we had this $20 waive that you did? And maybe they say, oh, they told me that, whatever, their house got burned in a fire. Okay, fine. Like, that's okay. Or, maybe they say, oh, I didn't really know that. I didn't understand. Okay, well, why did you not understand that? Were you not shown the policy? Like, where was that in your training? Did you not, go through that? And then talk to them about, okay, how can we make sure this never happens again, right? Do you understand now that, you can only do this if it's over $1? Maybe they'll say to you, man, we have people in here all the time and it really would just be easier if we could do it up to $5. Like, the supervisor waives it all the time at $5 or $10. I don't see why we can't just do that. Maybe we look at it and say, you know what? That's a good point. Maybe we can up that threshold a little bit so that you guys don't have to run to the supervisor every time you have a question from patrons. So maybe we can give a little bit, right? Maybe we can say, okay, we can work on that policy. We can think about it. Or we can just tell them, okay, I just want to, reiterate to you that that's the policy. Let's make sure that we're doing that from here forward and move on with it. Okay. So I think that's a good way to kind of go through that conversation and figure out, how we can satisfy that conflict. Okay. Some useful statements you can do to manage these conversations. Again, kind of with these I statements, right? I'm feeling that. What can we do to fix it? Right? I'm feeling that you are not engaged in your work. What can we do to fix that? Right? I'm feeling that you are not understanding this particular procedure. I'm feeling that you don't understand the closing procedure. How can we, what can we do to fix that? Right? Something that, I understand something. Can you like help me understand what's going on? Right? I understand that you don't feel like you should have to, waive people's fines. Can you help me understand why you feel that way? So we can open up that conversation, right? Gives people a chance to be heard, because honestly, that's all people want. They want a chance to be heard. They want a chance to say their piece. Okay. Things like, I noticed something. Is everything okay? Right. This happened to me once, years and years and years ago. I was having a ton of like personal stuff at home. And, because I don't bring my stuff to work, I wasn't talking to people about it. And my supervisor called me in the office and she said, man, I just noticed that you've been really distracted. You're not doing the quality of work that I expect from you. Like, what's going on? Is everything okay? And I told her, I'm like, I've got this stuff going on at home and here's what's happening. And she's like, man, I'm sorry. I didn't know that. I didn't understand that. Is there anything we can do? Right? Is there anything we can do to make this? I'm like, no, I didn't realize that I was slipping that much. I apologize. I'm ready to get back to work and we'll move on from there. Okay. Now she could have easily called me in the office, yelled at me for not doing my work. I would have went home even more sad than I was before. And nothing would have gotten solved, right? Because I wouldn't have worked better the next day. I guarantee you that. But, for her to ask me, is everything okay? Like, it just kind of was a little bit of a wake up call, but also, just a it's a olive branch, right? It's a let's figure this out together. So just be thinking about stuff like that. Asking people, hey, what does the positive outcome on this look like to you? Don't assume you know what they want. Ask them what they want. What does this look like? Okay. Think about asking people, what have we not considered in this? Like, what am I missing? Is there something I don't know about? Something I haven't considered? Maybe we do need to change a policy because, you're on the front line of things and I don't see that all the time. Maybe I need to take that into consideration. Okay. So ask people's questions, right? And then say, when you're working on collaboration things, like say, what if we try this? Would that be helpful to you? Don't try to dictate collaboration. That's not going to work. But what if we try this? Let's try this. Let's try this. What do you want to do? How would that, would that helpful? What be helpful to you? Okay. So again, we want this to be a two-part conversation. Okay. And so make sure that you're thinking about how you ask those questions, think about how you do that in a positive way. So some things that I think are really kind of important to think about when you're having conflict conversations. Manage your body language. Okay. Be open. All right. Don't sit at your desk with your arms crossed. This is not something I put in the slides. I probably should have. But manage your body language, manage your face. Okay. Because people can tell what your face is doing, even in your brain. They can see what's on your face. Okay. But in order to do that, you have to walk into it with a positive mindset. Okay. And that, I guarantee you, a positive mindset will transform all of your relationships. Okay. There's one thing I can get across to you. Conflict is fine if you come at it in a positive way. If I come at it in I am trying to help this person. I am not mad at them. I'm trying to help them. I'm trying to make this situation better. I'm trying to improve things. I'm trying to make sure everybody's okay. Right? If I come at it from that standpoint, it's usually a lot easier, right? So don't try to be, negative about things. And I have told management, when I do trainings for managers, I say this over and over and over and over again, that it doesn't have to be us versus them. Okay. We are all in this together. We're all in the same boat. We're all in the same place. We're all trying to get to the same outcome. We're all trying to do the best that we can for our patrons and our organization. Let's treat each other that way. Okay. So that's really the biggest thing that I can tell you is just have that positive mindset. Okay. Couple of last things here, and then we can have a little bit of conversation. So some do's and don'ts from conflict, just some easy things to remember. Some of the things that you should do when you are having conflict conversations, all right? Whether you're a supervisor, whether you are just talking to your coworkers, whether you're talking to volunteers, you know, whoever, patrons even, right? Find a private and neutral space, all right? Never ever have a conflict conversation with somebody in front of people. It's not cool. That's embarrassing for people. And again, they will go into fight or flight mode. They will go into protection mode, and you won't be able to have a positive conversation because they've already put a wall up because there's somebody else standing there seeing what's happening. Okay. Let everybody speak uninterrupted. Make sure you're listening to people. Make sure you give them a chance to say their piece. Acknowledge the emotion that's happening. Okay. We can't take emotion out of conflict. We're human people. We can't help it. All right. So it's okay to say things like, I understand that you're really upset about this. I understand that you may be angry at me right now. I understand that you might be frustrated. I understand that you're sad about this, right? I understand that this is hard for you, and it's okay to acknowledge that. But it's not an excuse. Okay. So just remember that. Again, use those I statements. It's a two-way conversation. I have a part in this conversation just the same as everybody else does. Focus on the behavior. We talked about that already. Focus on the behavior, not the person, and give concrete examples of what the behavior is that needs to change. Okay. Pay attention to body language as you're talking to people. Sometimes you will see people kind of shrink up on themselves, or they'll step back from you, or they'll not keep eye contact with you, things like that. Pay attention to that stuff. You're losing them, right? How do you pull back into that conversation? Ask them some questions. What do you need to get out of this conversation? Hey, I feel like you're not totally engaged in this conversation. What's going to help you, right? What do we need to do to make you, feel like you're part of this conversation, right? Also pay attention in case they start to get a little aggressive, right? If they're getting up real close to you or anything like that, be careful, okay? Because we can't predict people all the time, right? And then the last thing, I will beat this over the head until I am absolutely black and blue. And I'm already a lot of blue, apparently. Be positive and be constructive, okay? Positivity. I know I go crazy with that. I sound like some new age guru, but that's my vibe, okay? Be positive and try to be constructive about things. We are trying to fix things, not make them worse. Okay, so we need to concentrate on that, right? Some absolute don'ts in conflict. Don't put it off. That's what we're here for, right? We're moving beyond avoidance right now. Do not put things off. Do not avoid them. And remember, avoidance is a conscious choice to do nothing. Okay? You are deliberately doing nothing. And so you don't want to do that. Okay? Avoidance is not passive. It is an active choice, right? Try not to react emotionally in situations. Again, I know this is hard, but try to be logical about it. And try to put that aside. Try to put your own emotions aside as much as you can and say, you know what, I'm gonna choose to not be mad at this person for this. Unless they've really done something super hurtful to me, in which case I'm probably gonna go talk to a supervisor about it, right? But because I can't handle that. So just try to take some of that emotion out of it if you can, right? Don't dwell on the past. This is a really important one. I think a lot of times we work with people, sometimes we can work with people for 10, 15, 20 years. And we sit here and we go, oh, well, so-and-so did this. And you're like, when was that? Oh, it was like 12 years ago. I don't care, right? If we've moved on from that, let's just let it go, okay? If you have a conversation, you resolve it. I am a clean slate person, okay? If I resolve it and you don't ever do that thing again, I'm not going to think about it and I'm never going to talk to you about it again, okay? I'm not going to hold it against you because we all make mistakes, right? If any one of us says we don't, I think we're lying about it, okay? Or we're not trying very hard. And so don't dwell on the past. Don't hold things against people. Let it go, right? So just think about that. Don't be defensive. Okay, again, this is a two-way conversation. If somebody says something to you that is, I tell my staff all the time, dude, you cannot offend me. Tell me if something's wrong, tell me. I am not going to be offended because I want to grow and learn too. I want to know if I'm doing something wrong so that I can do it better. Because we all got to be in this together. I don't want you mad at me all the time. So tell me, right? And so just, don't be defensive if somebody corrects you on something. And then don't point fingers at people. Okay. Again, we talked about this. It's not about people. It's about the things. Okay. It's about the actions. It's about behaviors. So just be thinking about that. Okay. All right. So there's my last slide. So here's my positive encouragement for you. You guys can do this, right? You can do it. You can manage this. My contact information is there. I know Paula also put it in the chat, and we'll get the slides out to you. You'll get the recording of this so you can see all of this. So I think we have, Paula, do we have about 5 minutes?
We actually have 15 minutes.
15. Okay, cool. I wasn't sure if we were doing 50 or 60 here, so we got some time. All right, so the next thing that I usually like to do with this kind of conflict management conversation is to have some practice. Okay. Unfortunately, you guys are all in the chat, so it's going to be a little hard to do practice. But I think what we can do is, if you guys have any questions or any particular situations that you maybe would like me, and even Paula can help too, to kind of talk through and maybe give some suggestions, or maybe people in the chat can help give suggestions about ways that we might deal with that. Because I know everybody's got situations, right? So if you have anything, feel free to put that in the chat, and we can maybe talk about, maybe some specific situations and specific solutions for those things. Or if you have questions about anything else, okay? Okay, so just a comment from Kim here I'll address. Sometimes it's really difficult when the person is neurodivergent. There's a lot of barriers. So, okay, open and honest communication. As a neurodivergent person myself, it is difficult. Okay, it's difficult for me to have those conversations because of the issues that I have to deal with. But the biggest thing here is to understand people and ask them. Okay. When I do management training, I tell people the only way to know what people need, the way that they need to be communicated with, the things that you need to do for them, is to ask them. Okay. So if you're feeling that there's barriers with communicating with somebody, do not be afraid to ask, okay, I'm having some trouble communicating this with you. What's going to be the easiest way for us to have this conversation? What's going to work for you? Okay. Look at that. It's revolutionary, right? I asked you a question. We had open and honest communication about it, right? Now, if that person comes to you and says, oh, nothing's going to work, I'm never going to pay attention, well, that's a problem, right? That's a disciplinary problem. That's not necessarily a conflict problem, okay? Because people have to be able to listen to us. They have to be able to have conversations. But, sometimes it's really hard for people to make eye contact, okay? Folks who are autistic may just look all over the room, okay? They may just do that. It's okay. They're still paying attention to you. And you can stop and ask, are you hearing what I'm saying? Right? Do you understand what I've said? Can we talk about this? Okay. Sometimes people may not engage with you. Okay. They may not be able to talk back a lot, so you have to be able to pull that stuff out. Sometimes it may be easier to do some stuff in writing. Say, would you be more comfortable if I sent you my expectations in an email? Would you be more comfortable with that than having this conversation? Maybe that's okay. So just think about what are some alternative options for folks that might work. Okay. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat here. My scroll bar is going crazy.
I was starting to answer that one, but you go ahead and answer that from Alyssa. But I'm also putting some.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the whole thing here.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. My screen's just not big enough. There we go. Suggestions about what to do in conflict is across the entire or most of the staff. Example, new management is hired and staff aren't happy with them. How do you address that? So here's a question. If there is a legitimate reason that they're not happy with the manager, you got to deal with that manager. If it's not what you would consider a legitimate reason, and that's kind of a subjective thing, then you've got to go to the staff and say, I understand you guys aren't happy about this, but this is the way that we're doing things now. maybe you need some team building activities. Maybe one thing that I have found is a good way to kind of reduce some conflict is for people to get to know each other as people. To find situations where they can, maybe you have lunches where everybody sits down and, has lunch together. Maybe that, manager has, open office time, or maybe they meet specifically with each employee to say, hey, what's going on? What's your biggest, trouble right now? What can I do for you? All of that stuff. Generally, when I see an entire staff upset with a particular manager or a set of managers, one of two things is happening. One, they're not good managers. Okay, they're doing something that's not right. Okay, maybe they're making decisions without consulting the staff. Maybe they're making bad decisions. Maybe they're not nice. Maybe they're not being kind about things. So figuring out, are those managers, or is that particular manager doing the right things? Okay, that's a coaching conversation with that manager. Okay, the other option is the staff are super set in their ways and they're just teed off that somebody's changing things. Okay, in that case, a couple of things to think about. Are we changing things for the right reasons? Are we communicating appropriately about them? And have we had conversations with the staff about, this is our expectation and I need you to do it? This is one where that kind of competition might be a case of, I need you to do what they're telling you to do because they have the authority to do that. But it's always worth a conversation to say, why are you unhappy about this? And maybe it's just the fact that, maybe we never see them. They're always in their office and they never come out to the desk and they don't know what we're up to. And so they're making weird decisions because they don't know how that applies in real life. That's an easy fix. You talk to that manager and you say, look, your staff really wants to spend more time with you. So go spend some time with them. Okay. It's not going to solve all the problems, but it's going to go a little ways to, showing them that you understand that they have an issue and we're trying to solve it, right? That's the thing we can do, right? That's a good compromise. That's something we can handle, all right? So figure out what that problem is, ask those questions. It may be a case of, if you, Alyssa, I know you're the director, so, you may have to have conversations with every single person, or a subset of people and just say, hey, what's going on, and just have that conversation. So, okay. How do we deal with conflict when we have staff that are split into groups and don't get along? Again, team building activities, okay? Help them get to know each other as people. One of the best things that we do in our organization, and I don't know how big you are, what your options are, whatever, we have essentially cross-departmental groups where instead of doing full staff meetings, once a month, we have these groups. We have 4 groups. Everybody's in one. We call them cohorts, right? Everybody gets into one. But it's different people from around the building. So you're not with people in your department. I consciously make choices to try to get people separated from their departments. And these are our monthly meetings, right? This is where you get information. This is where you give feedback. This is where we have conversations about things. That gets everybody to know people as people. We also do fun things. We're doing like a bingo challenge right now. Like your cohort has to do these different things to get bingo challenges. And it's just a way for people to get to know each other as people. And I think that's really, really helpful. We just did I didn't think the staff were going to respond to this the way that they did, but it was fantastic. At our last in-service, I broke everybody up into groups. Again, purposely put them with people who are not in their departments. And we had a bucket full of questions. Some of them were work related. Some of them were personal questions like, hey, what's your favorite vacation spot? Or what's the thing that frustrates me the most at work? And we went off for an hour and a half. And each of these groups just went through their little questions and they got to talk about it and they got to go through it. And they all came back from that and they said, thank you for doing that. I heard things I didn't think I was going to hear. I, now understand why people are frustrated about things. And it was amazing, right? It doesn't solve all the problems, but it's a good thing to just get those people to talk to each other. Okay. And also there has to be some expectation. Like at some point you have to say, you know, it's my expectation that you get along with your coworkers. So what's going to help you to do that? Right. And if there's a genuine conflict, a genuine reason that they're not getting along, figure out what that conflict is and solve that conflict. Okay. So those are some things that you might be able to do there. I'm just going down the list here. So Megan, I need someone who needs longer than expected amount of time to process what they heard and formulate a response. Heard. What we worked out is that they will say, I heard you, so I know that they aren't ignoring. Absolutely. Okay. This is something for me, like when I'm sitting in meetings that I'm not running, I'm really quiet because it takes me a long time to like make sure I'm saying the thing that I actually want to say, right? I'm not going to just blurt something out. And so, yeah, understanding that about people and knowing that and just saying, yep, I heard you, and that you've got that system, that's fantastic. That's great, Megan. Okay, from Corey, I have a volunteer that I inherited. She has been allowed to go rogue. She's blatantly rude and disrespectful in front of people. She's a bully. Thought I could build a relationship with her and have worked very hard over the past year. Genuinely wants to be helpful, but it's always her way or the highway. Last year I was hearing she tells volunteers what an idiot I am, and now I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. Okay, this is something we should definitely address. All right. Conflict conversations in a positive way are great. They should always be our first option. If we have had those conversations, we have done our level best, and they are still not doing what we're asking them to do, then it moves into discipline territory. Okay. And especially with this as a volunteer, you may have to say to them, look, we've had this conversation. I cannot tolerate this. It is bad for our organization. Okay. I know that you want to do the right thing. I know that you care about what's happening. I know you care about the work that you're doing, but these are the things that you're doing that are undermining all of that effort, and they're hurting our organization. If you cannot stop doing those things, you're not going to be able to work here anymore. Okay. There is always a line in every conflict situation where the person either decides to change and everything's good, or they decide not to, and you have to take the next step. If you're the supervisor, awesome, you can do it. If you're not the supervisor, get somebody else to do it. Okay. Or if you're not comfortable with it, you need somebody else to come with you, go get somebody else. Get another supervisor, get your manager to help you out. Okay. You can only talk so much, and there has to be a point where you say to somebody, we cannot tolerate this anymore. I'm drawing a line, right? But again, you can still do that in a positive way. You can still give somebody a chance to say, yep, I hear you. I understand. I'm sorry. I'm going to do better. But don't keep giving them chances if they keep burning you. Okay. So just kind of keep that in mind. With a thing like this, honestly, if I had a volunteer who was telling people that I was an idiot and I didn't know what I was doing, and I had one conversation and said, don't do that ever again, that would be the line for me, right? I would say you don't need to be here because you're undermining the entire organization. You're making us all look bad, and that is not good for anybody. It's hard. That is the hardest conversation to have. But think about what's good for your organization, what's good for everybody else there. And you have to sometimes take that bull by the horns and just make that decision to say, we're done. We can't do this anymore. So that's the hard part, right? That's the not fun part, but that's where we're at. Okay. All right.
I hate to stop the conversation.
I know, I'm at time now.
I know, but everyone, we have the chat. I'm going to send it to Beka.
Yep.
It might take her, I don't know how long, it might take a week or two or more for her to look through the questions and get you some good answers.
Yep.
So that would work for everybody. At this point, I'm going to say my ending spiel. I want to say thank you very much to Beka, and thanks for all of you for being here today. And as a reminder, if you are watching an archived recording of this presentation, information on how to obtain your LEUs in the video's description in YouTube. So at this point, we'll stop the recording.